All right, if you're watching this, there's some need of trying to figure out exactly how to keep straight adding positive and negative numbers. So this is beginning of the year review and really foundational. So again, if you've been struggling, maybe your first quiz wasn't as good as you'd like it to be, and I told you to go ahead and watch this video and then I'll give you a worksheet. You want to pay close attention here, okay? So let's see if I can help you out and try to help everybody at one time. All right, so here we go. Adding positive and negative numbers. So again, we're still trying to train our brain. We're still going to work the foundational method. And again, remember, the shortcuts are coming, but for the purpose right now, we've got to get your brain trained. All right, so adding positive and negative integers. Here's really the key to it all. The key to it all is first you have to determine if you're adding two negative numbers or one positive and one negative number. So here's what happens. When we teach the concepts, we start out teaching how to add two negative numbers, and you're pretty good at it. For example, let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's suppose we had a problem like this, negative 3 minus 5. And you say, okay, that's 3 negatives and 5 more negatives, a total of 8 negatives. You write negative 8. Beautiful. Way to go. Then a little bit later on down the road, we're going to get a problem like this, perhaps. How about negative 10 plus 3? Oh, well, now we have a one positive number and one negative number. These are added differently. And you have to be able to keep track of whether we're adding two negative numbers or if we're adding one positive and one negative. And this is where students get in trouble in the beginning. It's a recognition problem. And so you have to recognize, hey, what am I doing here? Am I adding one positive and one negative, or am I adding two negatives? All right. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of first trying to analyze what kind of problem it is. All right. So I'm going to write some problems. You don't need to write. You're just going to watch and you're going to think, and hopefully we'll be in good shape. All right, so you might have a problem that looks something like this. Okay, so the first question is you have to ask, am I adding two negatives or am I adding one positive and one negative? All right, and what is your choice? And I hope you said you are adding one positive and one negative, right? That's the situation. You have a positive 5 and a negative 7. Now, quite honestly, we usually don't write the problem like that, but that's okay. All right, let's do another one. How about something like this? I don't care about the answer. I just want you to determine, are you adding two negatives or are you adding one positive and one negative? All right, you should have said that you're adding two negatives. Remember, this problem is exactly the same as this. Those two problems are exactly alike, but we write it the more simplistic way, and that's the way it's shown right here. So those two problems are exactly alike, and you have to be careful to make sure that you can keep track of which kind. So hopefully you said that's adding two negative numbers. Let's do another one. Number 3. Let's suppose we had something like this. All right, are you adding two negatives or are you adding one positive and one negative? Got your choice? All right, I hope you said you're adding one positive and one negative. You have 10 negatives and two positives. Okay, here comes another one. How about this? How about this one? Are you adding two negatives or are you adding one negative and one positive? Which one is it? Now, this is the kind of problem where most of you struggle. And when you got your quiz back, you'll see that this is definitely the kind that you missed most often. Again, what you have to recognize is you have 3 positives and you have 11 negatives. 3 positives and 11 negatives. You are doing a problem that has one positive and one negative number. And one more time, remember, we don't write all this, but this is exactly the same problem. 3 plus a negative 11. It's exactly the same thing, but we write it the short way, 3 minus 11. So be careful there. All right, let me do some more. Let me clear my screen here. Okay, let's do some more. What would you do with this? How about this? Negative 7 minus a minus 2. On this kind of a problem, we're not ready to decide yet whether we're adding two negatives or one negative or one positive. Whenever you have the minus, remember I taught you guys to do this. Minus a minus is a plus. Remember, it's like about face. You're heading to the right. The first negative says go opposite. Now you're heading left. But the second negative says go opposite again. You're right back going right. Whatever the case, remember, negative and negative is a positive. So let me rewrite the problem. Now it looks like this. Now can you determine, are we adding two negatives or are we adding one positive and one negative? All right, I hope you decided that we were adding one negative and one positive, right? You got 7 negatives and 2 positives. How about something like this? How about oops, I'm sorry. I'm staying. Oh, it erased everything on me. Great. All right, let's try this one more time. Number 6. What if we had a problem like that? Well, again, if you have two negatives in a row, you want to take care of that first. So look, here's really where we're at. So what kind of problem is that? Is that two negatives or one negative and one positive? I hope you decided it's one positive and one negative, right? I hope you decided there's a positive 3 and then 5 negatives, 3 positives and 5 negatives. And once again, let me show you what's really here, but we don't write all of this, right? It's the exact same thing, and clearly what I've taught you is this. Keep the sign with the number. Hey, if 3 has no sign in front of it, therefore it's got to be positive. This 5 has a negative in front of it. There's 5 negatives. And I'll say it one more time to you. Stop thinking subtraction. It's just messing you up. Don't think 3 subtract 5. Think 3 positives and 5 negatives. Think 3 positives and 5 negatives. Think 3 positives and 5 negatives. All right. Let me go then through and show you a few problems, and that'll be it for this review. So now let's add. All right, so problem number 1, 7 minus 11. You still have to ask the exact same questions. Is this two negatives or is this one negative and one positive? What do you think? I hope you decided that it was one negative and one positive. Okay. Remember how we add these. We take all of the one with the least. There are only 7 positives and there are 11 negatives. We take the same amount of the one with the most. So 7 of these 11 negatives. This is opposite numbers, and remember, they always equal 0. Again, this is exactly what happens with adding a positive and negative number. The 7 positives wipe out 7 of the 11 negatives. We use 7 of our 11 negatives. How many negatives are left? 4 negatives. Answer, -4. It's exactly how you want to do a problem like that. It's exactly how you're going to do a problem like that. Okay? Let's do another one. Number 2. How about something like this? How about something like this? So again, you got to ask yourself, am I adding 2 negatives or am I adding 1 positive and 1 negative? All right, well, this problem is 3 negatives and 4 more negatives. And remember the way we add these, 3 negatives and or plus 4 more negatives. That's what you're doing. 3 negatives and 4 more negatives. Now again, lest you don't understand where this came from, this is the exact same problem, but we don't write it that way. Because again, this is 3 negatives and 4 more negatives. We just don't write it that way in math. And oftentimes it's the hidden things that give students trouble. Okay? It's just 3 negatives, 4 more negatives, total of 7 negatives. Answer, -7, right? 7 negatives and -7. It's just like adding apples or marbles or peaches or whatever. And you can do that. You can do that. All right? 2 more and we're done in this review, and then you'll have some work to do on your worksheet. All right, how about number 3? Number 3, what if you had something like this? -8 minus -4. Are we ready to determine if it's 2 negatives or a negative and a positive? And the answer is no, not really. Take care of your 2 negatives first. And for clarity's sake, I'm going to rewrite what we have. That's what we have. Okay? So again, how are you going to do a problem like this? You're going to say to yourself, I have 1 positive and 1 negative. I have to take all of the one with the least. 4 is less than 8. Take all the 4 positives. Take the same amount of the 8 negatives. So I'll take 4 of the 8 negatives. And that's always 0. They're opposite numbers. The 4 positives wiped out 4 of the 8 negatives. How many negatives are left? 4 negatives. Answer, -4. It's the way the problem is done. That's how it works. That's the situation. Let's try one more. How about if we had -7 minus a -15? -7 minus -15. Okay, again, we've got double negatives, so let's first deal with that before we figure out what kind of problem it is. Let me rewrite for clarity's sake. So are you adding 2 negatives or are you adding 1 negative and 1 positive? Hopefully you agree you're adding 1 negative and 1 positive. How do you start? Take all of the one with the least. Take all 7 negatives. Take the same amount of the one with the most, so I'll take 7 of these 15 positives. That's opposite numbers. They wipe each other out. Hey, if I used up 7 of my 15 positives, I have 8 positives left. 8 positives is an 8. And that's exactly what's going on. It's exactly the situation. That's how you add positive and negative numbers. One last one. Are you ready? All right, here's the final one, grand finale. How about this? What do you get with that? Again, when I asked, what do you get? I hope the first thing you thought is this adding 2 negative numbers or is this adding 1 positive and 1 negative number? Look, those of you that are struggling, that needs to be your thought every time. Am I adding 2 negatives or am I adding 1 positive and 1 negative? And again, keep the sign with the number. You should have determined you're adding 2 negatives. This is 12 negative. Whoa, this is 12 negatives and 4 more negatives for a total of 16 negatives or -16. All right, sorry I was so negative today, but keep your positives and negatives straight. Hey, remember, here's the key. First, determine if you're adding 2 negatives or if you're adding 1 positive and 1 negative. That is the key. If you'll do that, then you'll be in great shape and you'll be able to determine exactly what the situation is, right? But that's how you've got to start. Determine if you're adding 2 negatives or 1 positive and 1 negative, and that'll take care of it. All right, that's the pre-algebra review, and you should be ready for your worksheet.